Voting is a civic duty. Let's register on the electoral list. This is a message from Equinoxe Television.
Hi there to all of you viewers of Equinoxe Television. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the news. Our major stories tonight: Prime Minister, Head of Government, Chief Dr. Joseph Dion-Gute is in the Northwest Regional Headquarters of Bamenda today for the evaluation of the Presidential Reconstruction Plan of the Northwest and Southwest regions. His visit comes at a time most areas in the Northwest region are all in deplorable states because of the armed conflict plaguing the Northwest and Southwest regions for a long time now. Details of his arrival today in Bamenda in this news edition. Plus, Leon Taylor, a CPDM councillor, announces his candidacy for upcoming presidential election in Cameroon. Analysts say that acts by him can further fragilize the candidacy of President Paul Biya. Viewers, those are our lead stories. Details and more in just a moment. Welcome back, viewers. Thank you so much for always being with us. We told you a while ago that the Prime Minister is in Bamenda today for the Presidential Reconstruction Plan of the Northwest and Southwest regions. After years of promises, Cameroon's Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph Dion-Gute, has arrived in Bamenda for a 3-day working visit that many residents hope will mark a turning point, with roads crumbling, farms isolated, and communities still recovering from the armed conflict that has been plaguing the Northwest and Southwest for several years now. Our reporter Stella now tells us about the arrival of the Prime Minister today in Bamenda.
Cameroon's Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph Dion-Gute, is in Bamenda for a crucial 3-day working visit focused on development and post-crisis recovery. On Friday, July 4th, he will chair the 7th Steering Committee session of the Presidential Plan for the Reconstruction and Development of the Northwest and Southwest regions, known as the PPRD. Launched in 2020 following the 2019 Major National Dialogue, the PPRD seeks to rebuild conflict-affected communities by restoring basic services, infrastructure, and local economies. So far, the plan has seen over 60 classrooms rebuilt, medical equipment delivered, solar-powered water systems installed in rural areas like Nous and Kaka, and markets reconstructed in Way and Baligansin. But for many locals, especially farmers, the biggest concern remains accessibility.
I appreciate the effort of the road network now, but I face so many challenges because, in fact, the road network is very poor. In fact, we use Okadas because, in fact, if vehicles that are not 4-wheel drive will not be able to leave the village and then come down to decide where we displace them and load like this.
During his visit, Prime Minister Joseph Dion-Gute will lay the foundation stone for the long-awaited Bamenda Intra-Urban Road Project, a key step to addressing the city's long-standing road crisis. He will also inspect ongoing and completed projects, as well as the Bamenda-Babaju Highway. For many residents, this visit is more than symbolic. They are hoping it brings concrete results, especially for those who feed the city but remain cut off from it.
Thanks, Stella, and our reporters are in Bamenda. We will be telling you more or bringing to you details on the Prime Minister's 3-day visits to Bamenda in subsequent news editions. Now, we told you also in the headlines that Leon Taylor, a CPDM councillor of the Central Region, has announced his candidacy for the upcoming presidential election in Cameroon. The CPDM party's internal fragility has been exposed by an unprecedented declaration of the candidacy by CPDM party elected official Leon Taylor Onana. A CPDM party councillor has made public his candidacy ahead of the 2025 presidential election under the banner of the CPDM, a candidacy that challenges the natural candidacy opposition of President Paul Biya within the CPDM. For me, Armstrong Sander tells us more.
Actually qualified as a pitfall to the old generational CPDM party supporters and sympathizers, The candidacy declaration of Leon Taylor Onana is found at the tail end of paragraphs 2 and 8 of his release titled Official Statement of Candidacy. In paragraph 8, Leon Taylor Onana says, "I am a candidate for the presidency of the Republic under the banner of the CPDM." In his campaign-like motivation, Leon Taylor Onana directly targets incumbent Paul Biya and his 43 years role in Cameroon, characterized by what he qualifies as injustice, misery, unemployment, underdevelopment and segregation. He presents himself as a candidate of the new generation, aspiring a great reconciliation and national growth. But just before his open candidacy declaration, Councillor Leon Taylor Onana had engaged a legal procedure insisting that his ruling CPDM party must hold a national congress in conformity with its internal rules and regulation to legally nominate its flag bearer in the 2025 presidential election, the last congress of the party held in 2011. He petitioned Cameroon's election governing body, LECAM, to appoint a special envoy to convene the congress, warning that bypassing this step invalidates any CPDM party nominee. Onana frames Biya's potential rerun as elder abuse, stating that it is time for our fathers to take a well-deserved rest, emphasizing national renewal. Onana's candidacy transcends personal ambitions, weaponizing the CPDM party's internal rules against Biya's entrenched authority, tapping into a generational demand for change. His campaign has exposed the ruling CPDM party's weaknesses, and observers say that the coming months will test Elekam's neutrality, the judiciary's independence, and Biya's grip on a system facing its most credible internal revolt.
And now let's come back to this separation between President Paul Biya and some elites of the Grand North. With the separation of President Paul Biya and the Grand North, somehow uncertainty looms around the head of state's strive for another mandate. A political analyst, Charles Fongang, fears for President Paul Biya, who will be left with a handful of electorates in the Grand North, given that a majority might now have to vote in favor of Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba Maigari, all of them from the Grand North. Our reporter Innocent has a report.
The departure of Issa Chiroma Bakari, Bello Buba Maigari and other influential members of government recently reveals a severe fracture. For many analysts, these resignations are not merely symbolic gestures. They reflect a breakdown in the chain of trust and raise the question of a political realignment in northern Cameroon, commonly referred to as Grand North. The Biya Grand North Alliance must adapt or risk losing its effectiveness.
Most of the time when you stand as a candidate, normally we expect you to move and meet the electorate, those who are qualified to vote for you. But for the past decades, President Biya never visited his electorate. What he used to do is to give allowance to those supporting him to do that. In the northern region of Cameroon, we now know that most of the time, Issa Chiroma Bakari or Bello Buba Maigari, who were there to present the vision of governance of Cameroon of Mr. Biya to the electorate. Now that Issa Chiroma Bakari and also Bello Buba are themselves candidates, they will do the same, but this time around, presenting their own personal vision, their own personal program of governance. So this electorate will now vote directly for them and not for the CPDM. So I believe that Mr. Biya is in trouble.
For this alliance to endure, it must renew its relevance. It is no longer enough to secure votes through the distribution of positions or material benefits.
This time around, Mr. Biya will have to move directly, presently, to visit the far north, the Adamawa and the North region, and to talk directly with this electorate in order to make them understand what he believes he can do for them. Not relying on his supporters to do so, because this time around, with the presence of Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba, I believe that he's in trouble. He needs to do those efforts, more efforts that he was doing before.
The challenge now is to respond to the expectations of a youth, increasingly educated, connected, and aware of its rights.
And two elites of the Grand North have written separate open letters calling on Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba Maigari, plus Professor Maurice Kamto to create an alliance in order to have a chance in the upcoming presidential election in the country. If Dr. Bashiru Hamadu wants Bello Buba Maigari and Issa Chiroma to form a common alliance with other interested political party officials, Hamadu Habibu prefers that these three candidates should form an alliance or a bloc and throw their weight on an energetic and ambitious young man to battle against incumbent President Frobia. Martin Jikan Gabriel has more.
As different political parties continue to strategize for the upcoming presidential elections marked by the recent ambitions nursed by two top elites from the Grand North, Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba Maigari, to challenge the sitting president, Paul Biya, a son from the Grand North, Dr. Bashiru Hamadu, has sent an open letter to the two elites from the Grand North. According to Dr. Bashiru Hamadu, with the experience Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba Maigari have gathered during their stay with the government, and knowing the needs of the people, if both decide to go in as individual candidates, the hopes of the people will be compromised. For this reason, Dr. Bashiru Hamadu is calling on Issa Chiroma Bakari's FSNC and Bello Buba Maigari's NUDP to form an alliance that includes other actors who are going for a change. For Dr. Bashiru Hamadu, an alliance can give confidence to the millions of Cameroonians who want a change. Another open letter is that from Hamadu Habibu to Professor Maurice Kamto, Bello Buba Maigari and Issa Chiroma Bakari. Hamadu Habibu is calling on the CRM, FSNC and NUDP parties to form a coalition with a younger person put in front. For Hamadu Habibu, all three leaders, Professor Maurice Kamto, Issa Chiroma Bakari and Bello Buba Maigari, have in different occasions made their supporters to lose confidence in them. Hamadu Habibu believes it is through an authentic coalition with a charismatic young Cameroonian filled with energy and ambition that the most wanted change will come to pass.
We will be talking more about forming an alliance in the second part of the news. Now let's talk something else. Authorities in the Douala 5 subdivision have uncovered an unlicensed cosmetic factory operating in the heart of Makepe Misoke. The factory, which has been producing body lotions, glycerine, refined vegetable oil, was found to be operating in an unhygienic condition, with products being discreetly sold in major markets across Douala. Immaculate Fogwe reports.
Body lotions, glycerine, refined vegetable oil, readily available to be distributed in shops across the city of Douala. Behind their neat packaging lies a much darker reality. The manufacturing plant, found in the heart of Makepe Misoke in the Douala 5 subdivision, is far from looking like a real cosmetic lab given its unhygienic state. Cardboard boxes stacked for packaging, loose stickers and large drums used to mix the substances are some of the items found in the building. Once the products are finalized, they are discreetly sold outside the city, making their way into large markets where they blend in with authentic products without raising any suspicion. Thanks to a tip-off, the special branch of the Douala 5 subdivision, in collaboration with the municipal police, stormed the apartment. The operation took place under the supervision of the divisional officer.
You see how individuals can put the lives of others in danger. First of all, the environment itself can never be acceptable for the production of such products that women use on their skin. It is an environment that harbors all kinds of dirt. The place is so dirty that even to stand there for 2 minutes, one is unable.
The owner of the illegal production factory says he has been operating since 2021. The divisional officer explains the next step he plans taking.
We are going to officially seize the products and create a commission to destroy. But then the promoter will have to face justice. We are going to send him to the Justice Department to do the rest.
According to health professionals, these products made by inexperienced hands can have serious consequences on the skin and even overall health. Vigilance is key to avoiding these risks.
We need to be very careful out there. And now let's treat you to news out of our national frontiers in Somalia, where 3 people have died and several others injured in an helicopter crash. The helicopter belonged to the African Union. And over to South Africa, where more than 100 people have died after floods severely affected the South Africa's Eastern Cape province that was in mid-June. A roundup of these stories with Cedric Chakutu.
100 deaths is the official death toll from the torrential rains that severely hit several areas of South Africa's Eastern Cape province in mid-June. In the worst affected districts of Or, Tambo, and Amatol, the storms caused landslides and forced hundreds of families to flee their homes. Authorities declared a state of national disaster to address the flood damage. Snow and heavy rains are common during the winter in South Africa, but the country is also highly vulnerable to weather fluctuation and climate change. In addition to the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, the Free State, and KwaZulu-Natal were the hardest hit by the floods, as neighborhoods in these areas are often built in precarious conditions. Elsewhere, an African Union helicopter crashed on Wednesday at the airport in the Somalia capital Mogadishu with 8 people on board. The aircraft belonged to the African Union Support of Stabilization Mission in Somalia, tasked with fighting the radical Islamic Al-Shabaab, an armed group linked to Al-Qaeda. According to Sona, the helicopter with 8 people on board crashed while landing at Mogadishu's Aden Ab Airport Wednesday morning after taking off from Balidogol, located about 90 kilometers from the capital. Somali Civil Aviation Authorities, quoted by Sona, indicated that despite the crash, flight operations remain normal. And in Nigeria, Nigeria's key opposition leaders on Wednesday unveiled a new coalition which they say is aimed to unseating the ruling party in Africa's biggest democracy ahead of the 2027 presidential elections. The Africa Democratic Congress Coalition, challenging President Bola Tinubu's All Progressive Congress Party, is led by Abubakar Atiku and Peter Obi, both runners-up in the last presidential vote. They are joined by other top figures including former federal lawmakers and former governors from the ruling party. According to David Mark, a former Senate president and the interim chairman of the alliance at the unveiling in the capital Abuja, the coalition will stop Nigeria from becoming a one-party state. President Bola Tinubu has been accused of plans to turn Nigeria to a one-party state by allegedly using state mechanisms to convince high-profile politicians to defect from opposition parties to the governing party. Although the Nigerian leader has denied the allegations, some of his closest allies, including within the ruling party leadership, appeared to be supporting it, triggering concerns in a region threatened with shrinking democratic space.
Thanks, Cedric. That brings us to the end of the first part of the news. Let's move on to talking points. Welcome back, viewers. Tonight, our guest is still Dr. Christopher Fomunyoh. He is the Regional Director of the National Democratic Institute based in Washington, D.C., and we will be pushing the discussion on a possible alliance of opposition parties in Cameroon. Doctor, thank you so much for accepting to be our guest again tonight on the news. We continue with the discussions or a possible positive change at the helm of the country after October. Why not? Dr. Christopher Fomunyoh, what do you think are the possibilities of Cameroonians to get the change they deserve, they desire for a very long time now through the ballot box and not just by violence or taking to the streets like some people insinuate?
Pleasure to be with you. Well, first of all, I would say that as a committed Democrat, if you believe in democracy, then you believe in peaceful processes that can lead to meaningful change, and that you will never advocate for violence. And so the hope, everyone's hope, I believe, is that the conditions be created such that citizens can express themselves freely through the ballot process, that civil society organizations should not be harassed, that the harassment of civil society organizations should stop, so citizens can organize themselves to be able to monitor the campaign period and monitor their own elections and conduct voter education and bring people out to be able to participate in the electoral process. That political parties should not be harassed, that they are allowed to form coalitions, which is a normal process in every political society, to form alliances to hold rallies and to inform their supporters and bring them out to vote. That ELECAM should be messaging in a way that's constructive and positive and transparent, that enhances citizen confidence that the elections are going to be conducted in an impartial fashion, that the security services should not allow themselves to be utilized for personal or partisan gain, because their responsibility is to maintain law and order for everyone on an equitable basis. I think when these things happen, or if these things were to happen, then there's no reason to expect that the process will not be peaceful. My hope is that no one in a position of authority is going to tinker with the process or try to influence or negatively impact the process in a way that can provoke citizens to opt out of peaceful participation. Yeah, I was going to also add that the beauty of it is that people are watching this process. Cameroonians are watching everyone's conduct, whether they're in government or out of government, whether they're in uniform or in civilian clothing. Cameroonians are taking note of everyone's declarations and everyone's actions, and there will come a time when people will be held accountable for the role that they played, either positively or negatively, with regards to the country's trajectory.
Yes, Doc, you mentioned a coalition in your previous response. What about the opposition creating an alliance, like you just said, to make a common and a stronger bloc? In our context in Cameroon, which you master very well, can that be a reality in our country? Don't you think it is a better way out for the feasible and peaceful transition which Cameroonians actually need?
Countries in which those coalitions have held. In Senegal, for example, there was a huge coalition that supported the current government of President Faye and the Prime Minister Sonko. In other countries, those coalitions have helped to galvanize people and to give a sense of, to make the electoral process more competitive. There have also been other countries in which the coalitions haven't really gelled, but some candidates have been able to emerge as strong candidates that have been able to pull the lever across the finishing line. The unfortunate thing in Cameroon is that our electoral system doesn't require a majority vote. That's a 50% plus one. It requires a plurality. And so if you have 20 candidates running, you could find a candidate winning the elections with 15% of the votes, if that's the candidate that has the highest number of votes. And it's extremely difficult, even if you win by 15 or 20% of the votes, it's extremely difficult for you to have the legitimacy to be able to govern, because 80% of the population would have voted for another candidate but you. And so these are some of the issues that opposition parties have raised with regards to our electoral code, but which unfortunately the government of the day refused to take into consideration. And so we're going to go into the elections with this code, electoral code, which has been subjected to criticism, but that's the code that we have. And so when you look at that, you can only advise candidates and parties to realize that they are stronger if they work together. And my hope is that in the next 3.5 months, conversations will be taking place amongst political leaders and candidates and opinion leaders and other people of influence to figure out how they can narrow the field so that the efforts of the people who want to vote out the current regime are not dispersed across 10, 15 or 20 countries.
You said it right there, Doc. Together, we are stronger. You're talking to us from the Washington, D.C. You recently met with Cameroonians in the diaspora, precisely in San Antonio. You were a special invitee. We know the weight or the impact the diaspora has on Cameroonian politics. Can you tell us what your discussions centered around, especially during this electoral season?
The Cameroonian community in San Antonio is one of the best organized Cameroonian communities in the United States. They are doing a fabulous job to try to re-galvanize and reunite Cameroonians across party lines, across ideologies, identify Cameroonian professionals in different sectors who are doing wonderful things for their community, but who are also doing wonderful things back home. And you know that in the past decade, because of the conflict in the Northwest and the Southwest, that our communities have become extremely polarized, even in the United States, in Europe, as well as back home. And what I saw in San Antonio is a Cameroonian community that is trying very hard to reconcile and rebuild and rebrand the Cameroonian image and the Cameroonian community as such. And so I went in with words of encouragement and support to them, and saying that their success in San Antonio, the things that they're doing within that community, and the things that that community is doing on the home front, which were discussed and shared with Americans living in San Antonio, could become the replica of the things that we will do once meaningful change comes about in Cameroon, once the environment and the timing is right for the diaspora to play an even greater role in reconciling, rebuilding, and rebranding our country.
Thank you, Dr. Christopher Fomunyoh. It's all about contributing to effect a positive change in our country. You are one of those actors, and your opinion counts. Dr. Fomunyoh, what can you tell Cameroonians few months to elections in Cameroon, the presidential election, before we go?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to my fellow compatriots. This has been a very challenging year, and these have been challenging times for all Cameroonians, irrespective of your political affiliation. Because I know people who are in government, even in the ruling party, who are not as comfortable as they would want to make believe in their public stance and their public declarations. It's been extremely difficult for our young people, many of whom have graduated from universities, who are becoming parents without having earned a job of caliber, that many of them, with the expertise that they've developed through academic institutions, have not had the opportunities to implement that expertise to uplift and improve the well-being of their fellow citizens. It's been an extremely difficult time for teachers, for doctors, for farmers, people who in the past had their earning and their way of life guaranteed, but who in recent years have seen their economic powers dwindle. We now all are aware of the conflict that is existing in Northwest and Southwest regions, which is now in its 9th year, which has not been resolved, a conflict which many of us, right from the beginning, said the best way to approach it was through open dialogue and negotiations and not through the use of violence. We've seen how populations are expressing their discontent in the North, in the East, in the South, in the West. 2025 provides a unique opportunity for all of those voices to be channeled into the political process so that your voices can be heard through the electoral process. I encourage everyone, each and everyone, to put their best foot forward, to realize that elections is not just what happens on election day. It requires your involvement even now, through the campaign period, through the sensitization of your neighbors and family members and professional colleagues, such that by the time we get to October 2025, the 8.2 million Cameroonians who have registered will be able to cast their ballots and determine the future of our country, so we can have an opportunity to reconcile ourselves, rebuild and reform the country, and also rebrand Cameroon, not just across the African continent, but on the global stage. I wish you well, and I hope that this year brings good tidings to all of us as Cameroonians. Thank you.
Those who have ears have heard. Thank you, Dr. Christopher Fomunyoh, for your contribution. Thank you for your time. And again, hope to have you some other time on the news. Viewers, that was what we put together this evening for the news. Thank you so much, too, for always being with us. Our programs continue Equinoxe will be yours in 30 minutes with Serge Aleng, and the news in the French language comes up at 8 p.m. Stay with us on Equinoxe Television and see you again tomorrow. Same time, God willing. Bye-bye for now.